Hey, I'm Hugh Short.
And I'm Jonathan Schleif.
And we're part of the ASC group Electromba. And for our project, we built 2 LED display helmets based off the music groups Deadmau5 and Daft Punk.
As well as that, we built a PVC pipe marimba. And the reason for that is because since 6th grade, we've been a part of percussion, and we have a really big passion for music. The reason why we're called Electromba is because we built the marimba as well as had electronics.
Yeah, so first we're going to start off by talking about the marimba.
The first thing we did with the PVC pipe marimba was we went to Home Depot and we bought 100 feet of pipe. We somehow managed to fit this all in a 2007 Honda Pilot with all the PVC pipe hanging out the passenger window. This was a very interesting ride on the way down from I-10. Once we reached home, we decided to go ahead and start cutting. We used a hand miter saw with a plastic frame in order to hold it in place. We finally found a powered miter saw, which made things much faster. We ran into our first issue when we realized we had to use couplings in order to hold them into the marimba. Using these couplings detuned many of these pipes down significantly. While we were able to salvage only a few notes, we began to retune many of these notes. While we were retuning, we decided to start building the stand. We used common wood for the main base, ball bearing wheels in order to wheel it around, and red oak for the notes. Once we built the main frame and mounted the ball bearing wheels, we decided to go to Aaron Peters' house and drill all 37 notes into the red oak. Once we got home, we stained the wood and spray painted the base, and we decided to use steel brackets and 90-degree supports so that the stand would not wiggle. Once we were done with the stand, we decided to paint the pipes with Valspar chrome paint. Once we were done painting all the pipes, we decided to start mounting some. We used silicones for the higher notes since they are just the pipe going straight up and down. Unfortunately for the lower notes, many of them tilted because of the weight. The final thing we did on the project was mount the LEDs. We used RGB LEDs with LED jumpers in order to mount them on the sides and underneath the sharps and flats.
We tried various things to help the tilting of the pipes. Unfortunately, we were unable to come up with an effective solution. We look forward to continue looking for a solution for the tilting of the pipes and actually playing on the marimba and submitting YouTube videos.
Inspired by the music group Daft Punk, I decided to work on building my very own helmet. It was apparent with the marimba and the other helmet that I would need to work as quickly as possible while still maintaining quality, so instead of going through the process of molding my own helmet, I found someone who would 3D print replicas at a very high resolution so I'd save time. This was more expensive than making it from scratch, so to save money, instead of chroming, I used plenty of layers of chrome spray paint. This left me with plenty of time to work on the electronics, the LEDs which line the visor and the helmet itself. The helmet itself uses 320 red LEDs split into 5 8x8 matrices. I had to fold the LEDs, anodes, and cathodes in a grid-like pattern so it would be able to control the circuit in a circuit. As you can see, the backs of every LED are painted black so that light also wouldn't be reflecting into my face. To control these LEDs, I used an Arduino Mega and personally wrote 3,742 lines of code to complete the display. Though this is a lot, it only made up 2 minutes or so of a display on a loop, so this gave me a greater appreciation for software I use every day. The boards on my subvisor are responsible for making the electrical signals from the Arduino line up with the matrices. The 5 boards I use line up with the 5 8x8 matrices, and the IC components I used on the boards are Maxim 7221s, and on each board is a 32 kilo ohm resistor which sets the current for the matrice, and a 10.1 microfarad capacitor bank to store power that may accidentally pass through. What holds all this together is the structure I made out of the subvisor, which contains two 1-inch ventilation fans so that my air will ventilate through the helmet and keep the electronics cool while allowing me to breathe. All this was really fun, and I had a good time working with electronics, which I used to be very unfamiliar with, and I learned a lot from this. Unfortunately, towards the end of the project, we ran into some technical difficulties with Daft Punk helmet. When you put all the components together with a battery, sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. It would be kind of off and on, and it would display the code on some of the rows and some of the columns of each matrix, or not display them at all. And I couldn't really figure out what was causing this, because it could have been a number of things with all the wires mixed around in there. There's so many for each LED. All in all, I wasn't able to finish the electronics part of the Daft Punk helmet, but I look forward to working on it later when I have a bit more free time during the summer.
Deadmau5 has been one of my favorite electronica artists since middle school. I especially thought that the helmet with the LEDs was cool. This inspired me to make a replica helmet for the ASC Senior projects. The first step to this was buying a 14-inch in diameter polycarbonate globe. I ordered it right before school ended and received an extremely damaged one, but when I called the company, they sent one out really quick. While I was waiting for the polycarbonate globe to come in, I decided to cut one ear with an X-Acto knife and realized that was not the best solution. I then found an online template and used that to make much more accurate ears, and I then made much more precise cuts using a bandsaw. I shaped them with sandpaper and decided to try to spray paint them. The unfortunate side of this was that I used a petroleum-based spray paint on a petroleum-based insulation foam, and it just ate away at the foam. This was when I had to make a whole new set of ears. After I made the set of ears, I decided to try to look for a solution. While I was looking for a solution, I decided to go make measurements on the polycarbonate globe. I used a tape measure and a lot of masking tape and painter's tape as well as Sharpies. I had to make the angle of the ears exactly 55 degrees to meet specifications. Once I was done masking off the helmet, I had to cut the mouth and drill the holes to mount the ears. After this, I added mini coats of primer, followed by mini coats of grabber blue spray paint. Then I put on a matte finish on the whole helmet and I began to mount the RGB LEDs. The first step to this was dremeling out holes by the ears so that I could fit the RGBs and feed them through. I then mounted them on the eyes after drilling holes for the eyes, and I used hot glue for the places that the adhesive would start coming up. Now it was time to start the mouth. I used a plastic cutout for the mouth, and I tried to spray tint it, and realized that I could not see out of the tint at all. This was when I decided to use a white cloth and hot glue in order to stick it on. I stuck the RGB LEDs on the mouth where I was planning on sticking them, and I glued the white cloth around the RGB LEDs, trimmed the excess, and finally mounted it onto the helmet. I then mounted the IR sensor for the RGB LEDs, and I found a battery which was 6,000 milliamp hours, which I mounted to the back of the helmet, and surprisingly it did not affect the weight all that much. I fed power from that to the sensor, which then fed power to the RGB LEDs, and with a code, it then made various patterns of light. Overall, this project was a complete success, and some issues involved the connections with cheap RGB LED jumpers, and eventually became an issue with connections, but I fixed those, and it works better than ever.
So this project's actually been really great for us. We've learned a lot.
We've learned a lot of things such as leadership skills, time management, and how to work on a long-term project.
As well as the actual skills required to make these helmets in the marimba itself, because for my helmet I didn't know much about circuits or coding or anything, and I found it really enjoyable when I worked on it, so it's been really good for me.
Aside from that, we also learned about fabrication. For example, I had to cut out multiple things on my helmet and make the ears and eyes very precise, and also we had to cut a lot of PVC pipe.
Yep, so if you're interested in this project at all, we've got an Instagram account, and I'll put up the account name and you can go check us out.
And eventually on the Instagram, we'll have a link in the bio, and
have YouTube videos of compilations of music that we're going to play from both deadmau5 and Daft Punk, and maybe even more eventually.